Okay, I think it's very important that I give the setting of this experience so that people can understand. I don't just get visions from God just to be getting visions. This is not a haphazard thing. It was at a very dear cost to my life. And expense of the time away from my family, of leaving before Thanksgiving here in the United States and being gone into January, walking and praying around the country of Wales. I was in the smaller little town prior to Carnarvon, Northern Wales. Carnarvon, Northern Wales is where Charles was coronated as the Prince of Wales. It was in the 11th century the largest marine land-based defense center of the British Empire. And I was walking Bangor, Bangor, Wales, the first little town before Carnarvon. You notice we have a Bangor nuclear submarine base out from Washington. But I was walking the little town of Bangor, Northern Wales, and it was very cold. It was snowing. The creek was frozen. I was systematically walking every street of that village, which I had been doing, working on 7 years of walking around the country of Wales. And the Lord spoke to me after I had tried to take a shortcut across the creek to continue walking the next street instead of going down to the bridge, coming back and walking that street. Took a shortcut across the creek carefully on the ice, but fell through the ice. It was just wet up to my knees, but I put my shoes wet and my pant legs wet up to my knees. And my pant legs froze in no time. It was that cold. My feet were freezing. And I was away from home during some of the most special time of the family, and cold and miserable. And the Lord asked me this question: Henry, are you willing to lay your wife and your children on the altar and never see them again this side of heaven? And I couldn't answer the Lord. And I said, Lord, I can't say yes because I'm fearful that I would be offended at you. And you said, blessed are those that are not offended at me. And I love you too much, but I can't answer that right now. And I finished walking the town of Bangor, Wales, got on the transport, went to the visitor center in Carnarvon, got me a room assigned, and headed up to the room, left off my backpack in the room that I rented, and came back down, got myself some fish and chips, and was walking back toward my room, eating those nice hot chips, as French fries, we call them here, and saw a group of young people standing outside of a building, and they were talking and laughing. And it reminded me of my teenagers at home, and I just lost my appetite, thinking I may never see them again this side of heaven if I say yes. And I threw my fish and chips in what they called the dustbin or the garbage can, went back to the room, took as hot a shower as I could to warm up my body, crawled into bed, woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, got out on my knees to pray, and the Lord spoke to me again. I was not talking to the Lord in that time. I didn't want to talk to Him. I didn't want to say yes. And the Lord spoke to me and said, I want your answer before you leave the room this morning. I broke into tears, crying so loud I buried my face in the pillow, afraid I'd be waking people in rooms around me, crying and saying, Lord, I'm so sorry, but I want to say yes, but I'm afraid if I say yes and you take my family, that I will be offended at you. And I love you, and I love my family. I love you more, but I can't say I won't be offended at you. And the Lord began showing me my life and raising my wife and I and 13 children. He began showing me all the times that He had intervened on our behalf. One of our children was born dead. Another one got his eye knocked out. God put a brand new eye in. He raised the one that was born dead. I had 6 of them at home. And he raised him from the dead right inside with me, holding him in my hands. His body was black with death. Things like that. And he raised me from the dead in 1984 in an automobile accident where witnesses said I had no vital signs for a minimum of 27 minutes. He showed me this and many things more and asked me each time, could you have done that for yourself? Well, I assure you, then my tears changed from tears of fearfulness to say yes to tears of repentance for being afraid to trust him. And I repented of that, and I said, okay, Lord, I give them to you. I believe that was a foundation where God was testing me to see if he could entrust to me what he was going to show me. I had received at the Visitor Center a map of the city of Carnarvon. My normal procedure was to go down to the bay or down to a river or lake, whichever is the lowest point at that village or city, and touch my feet in the water, and then systematically walk every street to the highest point, and then pray over the village or city from the highest point, lifting my hands and praying and declaring whatever the Lord asked me to pray or declare. And as I was walking down toward the bay, I came by the gate to the Carnarvon Castle. And the Lord said, go in and go to the highest tower. I didn't know what that was. So I went in, paid my fee for not taking a tour, just to walk around. That's where I found where Charles was coronated as the Prince of Wales. And I asked, which is the tallest tower, and may I get to the top of it? Oh, absolutely. And so they told me there's a little war museum at the bottom. You go through that, and you'll go through a spiral of stairs, and you go all the way to the top. It's permissible to go there. So I went up there, and I thought it was very interesting in that museum. I thought it was interesting. There was a letter from the Admiral in the service of His Majesty, stating of this small uprising in the colonies, and it said, in parentheses, it said what became the United States of America. He wrote the letter to His Majesty saying, I will settle this small uprising in a fortnight, which would be 2 weeks, and be setting sail back to Your Majesty's service. Well, another note was underneath it saying this was the War of Independence, and obviously he didn't make it back in a fortnight. Well, I kind of chuckled over that and thought, yes, there right there in this tower is a museum showing the foundation of America, becoming a nation. And I never thought anything about that. I was just thinking that's a nice, and I did take pictures of the letter and all that, and his uniform and everything they had there, and I prized that. But I headed on up the tower, and I got to the top of the tower. I looked off from Carnarvon, and I saw the island of Anglesey out. And so my mind was entirely involved in asking the Lord, do you want me to walk the island of Anglesey? It's not that big of an island. Or go on to the next town. And as I asked him that, all of a sudden, I was caught up into the heavens, looking down on the earth like a globe. And I saw a massive military movement coming out from what I didn't know where it was. It was way up by the Arctic, toward, I knew, Greenland, up that way, and Norway, Finland, Denmark, Sweden, up above, way up there. A massive military movement of Navy ships coming out, submarines, aircraft carriers, battleships, cruisers and all. And I saw them coming out, and then all of a sudden I looked across the United States, across the Atlantic to the United States, and I saw this submarine on the bottom of the floor of the sea, and it was so close toward New York City and that area that the light color of the sand was still out in its nose. It was that close. The light sand had lightened up the floor of the ocean there. And here was that submarine sitting there. And then, all of a sudden, I thought, oh my word. And I looked across the United States, because my family at that time was living in Portland, Oregon. And I saw submarines poised over there. I looked around, and I saw them poised down by California, around toward all the way from San Francisco to San Diego. I looked across the continent, and I saw in Florida. I saw them poised near in the Gulf of Mexico and over on the Atlantic side, just sitting there under the water. And then when I looked back across the up toward New York, looking back at that one that I first saw, something caught my eye. All of a sudden, all of these radio towers, I thought they were radio towers, began springing up all across the United States, thousands of them, which now I know to be cell phone towers. There was not one cell phone tower at that time. This was December the 14th, 1986. And all of these cell phone towers spring up out of the earth, and I watched it, the dotted line like they were transmitting, like you'd see with a radio station. And all of a sudden, I saw the signals of every one of those towers just sprinkled to the dust, like they were trying to transmit, but they were just sprinkling to the dust. And then I saw this missile come. I looked back toward New York City. I saw this missile come out of that submarine, go up over New York City, and explode. And I watched New York City disintegrate right before my eyes. Because my family lived across in Portland, Oregon, I looked across the United States. I saw an explosion up toward the area of Seattle, Bellevue, and a massive explosion there. I saw another one down by San Francisco, and two more, one down kind of below that, and then one towards San Diego. Then I saw another one explode between Miami and Tampa, Florida. And I cried out in the heavens, "Oh Lord, oh Lord, they won't even know what hit them." The radio broadcast sprinkled to the ground. They won't even know what hit them. As I cried out, this alarm went off in me as I saw this first missile go up. They won't even know, they won't broadcast. The people won't even know what hit them. And then all of a sudden, after I saw all these hitting, I was back down on the tower there in Carnarvon, looking out over the island of Anglesey, thinking about what I had just seen, and I thought it had literally happened at that instant. So then I looked off to the right, and there literally were British warships in the port there at Carnarvon, and there were no alarms going off, no lights flashing, no one hurrying to the ports to get onto those warships. I turned and looked off the tower to the left down into the city of Carnarvon. There were no alarms, no sirens going off, business as usual that morning, probably about 9:30. And I thought, well, Lord, if this was really happening now, then there would be alarms here. They would know. And so I looked up and I said, Father in heaven, if this is not happening now, what will be the sign of its time? And the sign and of its time. He said to me these words. He said, I'll never forget them. He said, when Russia opens her doors and lets the masses go, the free world will occupy themselves with transporting, housing, caring for the masses, will begin crying peace and safety, letting down their weapons. And that's when it will happen. And where are we today? Where are we with that? Think about it. Glasnost, Perestroika, Gorbachev, and Senior President Bush. On the front of Time magazine, I believe it was, sitting there side by side with the Russian general standing right behind Gorbachev, no American general standing behind Bush, and the new Russian flag of three colors, not the hammer and sickle, crossed over with the American flag. And I thought, dear Lord,